Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Bracken. I'm the president of the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce. We brought together today a very strong, large group of reporters who work every day to try to uncover the many, many issues facing our state today. So let me up front thank Tom, Stacie, Matt, John, and Brent for all the hard work they do every day to decipher the mysteries of New Jersey. And welcome everybody today and the reporters to New Jersey Reporters Forum. There's absolutely no shortage of issues to discuss with regard to our state, starting, I guess, with the FIFA announcement about the World Cup final being here in 2026, the potential impact that's going to have on our economy, the very bad news about the disparity study that was put out a few weeks ago. We have the governor's state budget coming up. We have workforce shortages. We have AI coming on like gangbusters. We have the Transportation Trust Fund renewal facing us, gubernatorial and senatorial races. We got a whole lot of stuff that these fine people will cover today. So I will introduce Tom Bergeron, who will introduce the reporters in a minute. But before I do that, I want to thank our sponsors for today's event, AT&T, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and KPMG. They've always been supporters of ours and great citizens in the state of New Jersey, and we thank them for all that they've done for us and for the state over many, many years. So without any further ado, let me introduce the owner and editor of ROI-NJ, Tom Bergeron, who will moderate today's event and introduce our panelists. Tom, it's all yours.
Tom, thank you very much for that. Everyone, welcome. Glad to have you. For those of you new to the program, we do this a couple times a year. We like to say it's our version of the McLaughlin Group. Unfortunately, it sort of segues into me being Ron Burgundy, and we just sort of try to get to the finish line and hope you guys stick around. This is a fast-paced, unpredictable half hour. We're going to talk about key issues. We're going to have a little fun. Before that, I'm going to introduce everyone. I'm going to start, if we're truly the McLaughlin Group, I'm going to bring in the Eleanor Clift of the group. That's going to be Stacie Sherman of Bloomberg. We love Bloomberg. We say this every time. Whenever there's a cool story that we see, we know that Bloomberg does it. We know Stacie's in charge of a lot of that production. Stacie, glad to have you.
Thanks, Tom. Happy to be here.
Next up is Matt Fazelpoor. Listen, we love having Matt right up after the Super Bowl. He's an all-pro reporter. He's got a smile on his face, even though his beloved Giants not only didn't make the big game, they didn't even make the entry to the big game, but he showed up nonetheless. Matt, you're our Pro Bowler. Glad to have you.
Tom, thank you, and appreciate the chamber having me. And yes, the Giants have had a rough few years for sure, but great to be with you all this morning.
Next up, we got two newcomers, an old friend, Brent Johnson. And look, for those of you who don't know it, we're all going to salute Brent. And I don't know why Brent's getting any of the credit for this. Let's be honest. He's a new father. His wife did all the work. And for those who know Brent, know he's a big Mets fan. So I'm not sure. I think the baby is baby Champsky or baby Tuffle or baby Abgamyani. What Met great have you named your latest child after, Brent?
The baby is Carter, after my childhood hero, Gary Carter. But Tuffle is an awesome name. So, maybe the next one.
And last but not least, look, we're going to stick on the baseball thing. Look, us in journalists, we always salute our friends in the business. We're not all competitors. I mean, we're competitors, but we're glad that we found other people that are dumb enough to do this for a living. So we always welcome them. John Reitmeyer, we're in the presence of like the Michael Jordan of budget reporting. Everybody on this panel, everyone in the state says, oh, it's a budget. I think Murphy goes to Reitmeyer and says, what are we doing? This guy is the absolute expert on budget. John, glad to have you.
Thank you, Tom, and it's great to be here and be part of the discussion this morning. Really looking forward to it.
So if John's like Babe Ruth, we always talk about Spotlight. We always talk Tom Johnson is like the Lou Gehrig on energy reporting. These guys have it covered. So make sure you check out NJ Spotlight. Myself, I'm like the Chuck Woolery of reporting. I blew the lid off of that Valentine's Day couples the other day. So I'm pretty proud of that. I'm going to get the Pulitzer application in. That went over well. Look, all fun and games. Speaking of games, let's segue into the World Cup announcement. A great win for the state. Estimated, I don't know where they get these numbers. They just make them up. Potential $2 billion impact economically. 15,000 jobs are going to be created. And here's the fun part for the business community. The governor would like to raise $150 million from you. I'm sure you've already heard from him, to pay for various things. And I'll do a little background here on the reporting. What we're talking about here is there's going to be a lot of excess security. There's going to be a lot of signage. There's going to be a lot of transportation needs. There's a lot of things where businesses can come in. As I think you know, FIFA controls everything. So this is one way to be a part of it. There's a lot of opportunities over the next couple of years, but it is a big ask of $150 million. So I'm going to call on Brent right away and say, is he going to be able to get $150 million from the business community for the World Cup?
I would say yes, although it's really going to be a challenge. You have a governor here, and part of the reason why they got this bid to come here for the final is because you have a governor who is so invested in this. This is something he's been talking about even when no one was asking him about it for the last few years. So he's going to be really invested in getting that money. Now, 150 million is a lot of money, especially at a time when everyone's budget is tight. So it possibly couldn't happen, but I really think he's going to go all out to do this.
I had heard that they raised $100 million for the Super Bowl, which was a 1-week event in the cold. You have to realize not just the World Cup, not just the 7 or 8 games that we're going to get in the 6-week tournament, but the year before is the FIFA Club tournament. So there's going to be other options there. Matt Fazelpoor, you think the business community is going to jump in on this?
Yes, I do. I mean, this is just the whole thing just as a whole is just it's a huge win. I mean, it's a major impact. I mean, even if the numbers don't even come close to the projections, I mean, the economic impact and the cultural impact of what this will mean for the area, I don't see a way they don't get it done. I really believe it'll get funded.
One of the benefits, of course, is that this is the New York, New Jersey, or the New Jersey, New York event. It's lovely that the stadium is being named New York, New Jersey, but they're going to be looking for dollars from New York too. And I know, Stacie, you're based here, but you bring the Bloomberg thing, so we're going to ask you to speak for New York City. There's 2 different states that can contribute their fair share, as we like to say. How big is this going to be for the region from what you guys are hearing?
Well, first, let me say lifelong Jersey girl. So I'm kind of annoyed that it's a New York, New Jersey stadium. But I think they're going to be able to get, help from both New York and New Jersey. I think this is the only way New Jersey got the deal was to partner with New York. It's just you have to wonder how much of the benefit is going to go to New York and how much is going to go to New Jersey. You have people that are going to come and stay in hotels and eat at restaurants, and you hope that that's going to be on the New Jersey side, but you don't know right now what's going to happen.
And you hope that there's not going to be a disaster with NJ Transit and the trains getting there. The governor has pointed out many times, we can talk about Taylor Swift in many ways, but saying, hey, we handled 3 Taylor Swift concerts, we handled Bruce concerts, we handled K-pop concerts. The governor is good on NJ Transit. The problem is we need to get a little money to NJ Transit. They're like 10 or 20 bucks short of what they need for the coming year. So I'm going to segue to John, and we're going to go to the budget, and let's talk a little bit about NJ Transit. Is there money there for it? Should there be money there for it? Give me your thoughts on transit as it comes to the budget.
Yeah, we're going to find out in about 2 weeks, what's actually going to be, if it's something that the governor thinks the state has to step up and provide more for. Quickly on the sporting events at the Meadowlands, we also have a big one coming up this weekend. I happen to be a hockey fan, and we have the Stadium Series, which is almost a dress rehearsal in some ways. Some of these big concerts that you referenced were definitely viewed as maybe wins in the main for how the state handled those events. Obviously, World Cup's way bigger, but we have a weekend of hockey potentially in the snow coming up, which will be another way to showcase this region. And quickly on World Cup, we also have 6 games playing in Philadelphia, so that's a big deal for South Jersey. I'm a South Jersey native, so and including a July 4th game just over the river in Philadelphia. So a big opportunity for hotels in that region and for a lot of economic activity to occur in South Jersey. When we talk about the NJ Transit budget, the subsidy, not getting too much into the weeds, but the subsidy in our current fiscal year budget for NJ Transit was increased from 100 million to 140 million. It had been up over 450 million before the pandemic. But that was before the federal government got very generous when it came to providing mass transit agencies and states themselves with a lot of federal aid in response to the pandemic. So it will be interesting to see if the governor, on one hand, comes in and himself proposes a big boost in the state subsidy that NJ Transit gets every year out of the budget. And then on top of that would be, for as long as I've been covering New Jersey, there's been talk of creating a dedicated funding source for NJ Transit. So they don't have to rely on what's going to be in the budget from year to year. It would just flow directly, the CBT, corporation business tax, there's a portion of it right now that is automatically dedicated to funding land preservation and like Green Acres programs. That's been the holy grail for transportation advocates in New Jersey, that some sort of function of law direct revenue into NJ Transit's operation budget automatically. Right now, there's a memo that directs some Turnpike Authority money. Every year they throw some clean energy money. So instead of cobbling that together, real quick, the big gap, if we look at NJ Transit's budget projections, is not really in the fiscal year that we're coming into. They have this proposal to increase fares to close around $100 million gap on an almost $3 billion operating budget, roughly $3 billion. It's in the following fiscal year that they have the really big gap. So they could probably patchwork it together in this budget we're going to hear about at the end of the month. But in terms of the state, but the real big challenge is, in that out year, and that gets us back to World Cup, because you would think we would want NJ Transit firing on all cylinders as we have a whole bunch of people come into the region to probably take mass transit to our nice stadium.
So I got to jump in here. Am I going to be the only one of the panelists that's going to bring up the big sumo wrestling on Sunday? We have it's a big weekend of hockey, but we
Yes,
got the
you
sumo guys coming to the Prue Center, which we wrote about it. I really do think this is going to be a cool event. So there's all kinds of sports. All right, the view from the cheap seats, John, is look, we've got a budget. If this is such an important issue for the governor, right? I'm going to get this fixed if it kills me, blah, 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 blah. We've been hearing this since he was candidate, Murphy. Instead of saying, look, I get it. Everybody who runs a business in New Jersey, we're all like self-made billionaires and we got Taylor Swift money. But instead of hitting those people up, couldn't you just put it in the budget yourself to cover on that? This is a big budget. If this is important, Brent's going to get into his household. He's got another mouth to feed. They're going to figure out whether we're going to the petting zoo and getting a baby giraffe or saving for college. You got to decide if this matters to the governor. Can he just put it in the budget? Why is that so difficult?
Perhaps don't forget that some of our federal COVID aid was allocated to the Meadowlands in the thought that we would be pushing for World Cup. So there's, I think it was 15 million, not quite the number that's being discussed now, that's already been allocated out of that. It's off budget. It's the federal COVID money. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly we've seen the governor and lawmakers approve spending that is very parochial in nature. A lot of the items that get added on at the end of June probably don't have the potential for a multiplier effect like we would get perhaps from spending on the World Cup. But we're entering a much tighter phase when it comes to state finances than we've had for the last few years. So there will be a lot of hands out when we have the budget hearings coming up in March. We're probably going to hear a lot of different needs, and it'll be one of those things where politically, some of the different ways that what's discretionary in the budget, so much happens automatically in terms of having to pay for certain things like Medicaid, pension contribution, things like that. So the discretionary slice, there will be a lot of, I think there will be a lot of demands for funding coming up in this new fiscal year.
All right, if we're going to go political, I'm going to go to my friend Brent and say, let's talk about the governor. Look, he gets to pick and choose what he wants. He gets to talk to the legislatures. He gets to bully pulpit. Talk about NJ Transit, especially now with the World Cup. Politically, does it make sense for him to push more for this as opposed to pushing the CBT? Read me the tea leaves on that.
Yeah, I know the CBT thing about restoring it, coming from the legislative side, there's a lot of interest there. I reported a few weeks ago that you're likely going to see some sort of quote unquote revenue raiser in this budget, whether it be the CBT reinstored, the surcharge reinstored. There's even talk about restoring the sales tax to 7%, which doesn't seem like that's going to get much muster. There's other things probably, you're probably going to see the gas tax go up to help fund the Transportation Trust Fund. NJ Transit factors into all of that because there's a direct correlation to people seeing higher fares. There's going to be a lot of tough conversations heading into June. I don't want to say the word shutdown pretty soon, but we're back to those type of talks. We've gone a few years without hearing that because we've had the federal funding and borrowing, and it's been a bit better for the state budget. But this is a year I don't know what we can expect, but it's going to be a very tight budget. Murphy himself said it on his radio show last night. This is going to be a tight budget. So I think everything's on the table. It's a matter of what happens in the end.
It's a tight budget. I think the budget's much smaller than it was when he inherited, right? He doesn't have a lot of money to play with. Is that?
I mean, that's what Republicans will certainly point that out.
And listen, let me mention something on the sales tax because somebody brought this up, and I've been meaning to kick this to some of my friends who like to use the phrase fair share a lot. So let's say we raise the sales tax back up to 7%. I think it's about 3/4 of a point, right? Is that it? I don't know that necessarily people would notice it. It raises a whole bunch of money. And someone made this point. The sales tax, there's no better tax where people pay you the fair share. The people who have more money, buy more things, pay more tax. It makes sense on the whole. If you have more, you pay more. So why wouldn't we go and say, okay, let's raise the sales tax as opposed to the CBT? Anybody want to jump in there? Stacie, I saw you smiling, but Brent, go ahead.
Well, just politically, it's a tax that goes up on everybody. The CBT only goes up on corporations. So you put tax in a headline, tax increase, people naturally, perks their interest. So that's the fear there on the legislators who have spent the last few years saying we have to make New Jersey more affordable, putting a tax in that affects everybody that buys goods. They seem leery of that, regardless of the math and the arithmetic that goes with it.
Stacie, do me the math. What do you see?
Well, I mean, for someone who's been around as long as I have, you'll remember Florio and his sales tax and what happened there. You'll remember John Corzine and the shutdown that happened over him trying to raise the sales tax. It's a sensitive topic because it affects everybody. So you're messing with something that's proven to piss people off. So it's the sales tax is when it makes sense, right? Because we're trying to share what is it called? Your fair share, right? So give the tax to everybody, but it is one that is politically fraught.
Let's go to Moneybags Matt over there. I see him nodding his head. He's willing to pay all the taxes you need. What do you think on this?
Well, I just think, again, just to kind of echo what everybody's been saying, there's just a lot of things coming to a head all at once here. And, it's just going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. I mean, something's going to have to give somewhere amongst us. And NJ Transit is certainly at the center of all of these issues that we're discussing. But I just in general, and even on the CBT, Murphy this week on his show, he did push back really firmly against tying those things together, the CBT and the NJ Transit. He said he didn't see it as that. But just to kind of echo what everybody's been saying, I think there's going to be a lot of tough discussions that are going to have to be had.
John, let's go back to you on the budget. We've talked about NJ Transit. There's a lot in this budget. I'm going to ask you to give me 3 things that people need to know about the budget that people probably aren't thinking about that are going to be contentious and important for the state.
Yeah, I think one thing will be revenues and where we're at. There seems to be a lot of confidence right now that we're at a soft landing, and that's probably good news nationally. But New Jersey's unemployment rate is still running higher than the national average. And so I think the economic forecast is going to be really important because where they foresee sort of revenues going is where then we have to talk about, do we need to raise revenues? Quickly on the sales tax, interestingly, there is a small slice of the sales tax that's constitutionally dedicated to funding the Transportation Trust Fund. So when we talk about like which tax sources have a nexus to which use, we actually already have a connection between the sales tax, although it's generally viewed as a regressive tax, meaning I think wealthier people probably pay more of the sales tax, but lower income people probably pay a bigger share of their annual income in the sales tax item. So that's always a big debate whenever it's happened. When Christie cut it, it was a huge debate. Another big thing to look at would, I guess, be when we get to the end of June, when we see add-ons. Last year, when the add-ons came, we were actually seeing the beginning of these revenue forecasts that got softer, and lawmakers blew right through that in their election year and heaped a lot onto the budget at the last minute. We actually are running with a structural deficit right now, meaning we're spending more on an annual basis than we are projecting to take in revenues, which is fine in some ways because the state has an $8 billion surplus sitting on the sideline. But in other ways, you can only do that so much, and then your surplus goes away. So something to watch. I'll segue into my last thing to watch is next year will be an election year again for the Assembly. So it's the year before when you usually see the painful budget, right? They want to run on things like they did last year, where they were talking about increasing spending, creating new property tax relief programs, throwing more money to anchor. But the budget coming in before an election year is usually where we see sort of the more difficult things get done. So you create that glide path. So politics may be more of a concern next year, but already probably influencing this year's budget.
You mentioned next year's budget, and our old friend Steve Sweeney always uses the term a multi-year budget, right? There's always a push on that. Does that make any sense, or is that just kicking the can down the road and it really wouldn't have an impact? Is that something you'd be in favor of or think is a smart move?
So without getting rid of objectivity, what I can say is other states have had success doing that. And there are reports that are put out nationally by public finance experts that show places like New Mexico, which is heavily tied to energy taxes. And we've seen a big change in energy usage. So they've used long-range projections to sort of head off deficits, like the group that's working out of Rowan University's Public Policy Center is doing these types of long-range projections. States like North Carolina have stress testing that look ahead to see how well your budget could weather the storm. New Jersey doesn't really have that formally as part of its process. I'm told it's done in-house and those types of things aren't made public. I guess they could rattle credit rating agencies if they show too many fissures in state finances, but certainly other states have done things like that and had success and been able to foresee and head off problems sooner. The last big shortfall we had was during the first year of the pandemic, and that was when we did emergency borrowing and pulled back funding for things like, at the time, was homestead rebates, which were property tax relief for lower income and seniors. So when you have a surplus, that helps, but when you're doing your long range projections, you can see those types of things, and maybe then seniors still get their property tax relief when we do hit a bump in the road.
Let me go one more thing on the reality and the politics and what people see. And you state house guys can tell me if we're wrong on this. It's easy to say, okay, let's tax the corporations and not the sales tax because that just hits the businesses. But if you tax the businesses, they're going to raise the prices on their products. If you raise minimum wage, all good, but your burger at McDonald's and Five Guys goes up with the cost of minimum wage. So it's not like you're just saying, let's just hit on these billionaire businesses. When you do that, everybody's paying more. Are they not seeing that, Brent, or is it just it's easy enough to, once again, just rely on the business community?
I think the lawmakers take the gamble that public relations wise, it's easier to hit on the businesses because they're the big corporations. I think, not necessarily is that always fair. But I think you've seen it in recent years where they're talking about kitchen table and pocketbook issues. Those are two phrases you hear a lot. So I think that's why you see that disparity, because the lawmakers are gambling on the idea that people aren't thinking that corporations are going to take a major hit. But yeah, that is one of the fears. It's one of the things that goes into the discussion, but that's kind of what's coloring that.
All right, so we got 2 years left of the Murphy administration, which is time to talk legacy. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that can be brought up here, but we'd be silly not to start with the family legacy. For those who may not be aware, his wife is running for the U.S. Senate. It apparently has gotten more support than any candidate ever, but sort of suffered a tough night on Saturday in Monmouth County. I don't want to get into the whole Tammy Andy Kim thing. I want to get into the idea of how is that going to impact how the governor manages it, how other people have to worry around this. this is sort of throwing a monkey wrench in everything that happens here. Am I right on that or am I off?
No, you're right. This is coloring everything that's going on in politics right now. I mean, he's being asked about it, and whenever he's public, if she does get elected, that means of the 3 statewide positions in this state, 2 U.S. senators and a governor, 2 will be in the same household. So that's an unprecedented idea. And then there's also the criticism and the accusations of nepotism that the governor still controls 2 state budgets and signs all these bills into law. He could, hand out political patronage to get his wife's support. So, I mean, this is definitely hanging over everything in Trenton. It's remarkable. I mean, that this is happening. You don't see this every day.
Well,
So
wait a
yeah,
minute. I'm gonna say, let's be fair here. And New Jersey's no different than other states. Tom Kean Jr., right?
Yes.
We have Bucco. We can go down the list. Menendez is, there's plenty of family legacies in New Jersey politics, as is the case in every state. R&D, no difference.
I feel what makes this different is you have the sitting governor, who's also the highest ranking Democrat in the state, who has the ability to control these things. That makes it a bit different. Tom Kean Sr. was out of office when his son ran. Bob Menendez was in office, but I don't know how much patronage could be done there. I'm not saying those things are going on, but that's the accusation and the fear. So yeah, of course, we're a very nepotistic state. We're a state that's criticized for having a lot of corruption. So it's not unprecedented, but just the idea that 2 people from the same family would control 2 of the top 3 seats is
Look,
unusual.
and I also think it's very key in the state that you have to be Irish to be in one of the top seats too. That's very important in our state.
Apparently,
We've
yeah,
shown
yeah.
that time and time again. Stacie, Matt, you want to jump in on the Tammy issue, or do you want to?
I would just, or Stacie, you can go.
All right, I was just going to talk about Andy Kim, because I think one of the issues is that Tammy is running against a very popular candidate, right? Andy, he's a very grassroots kind of representative. He has a good following. He's liked a lot by his constituents. And so now it's pitting, politics against like your grassroots kind of person. And that is where there's problems, right? Because you have one candidate who, Tammy, or she might be very qualified, but no matter what, it's going to come off as, oh, it's the governor's wife, and she got there and she has the support of the party, versus the guy who, eats dinner with his kids at the local diner, and that kind of image there. And so when you have those 2 images, it's kind of makes an interesting election.
Yeah, and it is definitely hovering over everything. And yeah, Andy Kim is tough. I mean, it's going to be a slog. He's a vote getter. I grew up in Toms River. He represents the congressional district that I grew up in, where a lot of my friends and family live. I mean, he is, like Stacie's saying, he's very popular. So I think this is going to be a dogfight to the end for this primary.
All right, we could go on all day. I could make a bad "Rock Me Gently" joke from the 70s, but I'll pass on that. Let's go to the next legacy issue, the disparity study. And here's the good line on that. The governor talked about it from the time that he was candidate Murphy. He wanted to get it done. Everybody knew what it was going to say. It took a long time to come out. It was actually worse than people thought it would be. And yet, to me, the big news story is absolutely nothing has happened since. They haven't even announced a blue ribbon committee that's going to look at things and have a roundtable discussion. They haven't even done that. I mean, we did the story 2 weeks out. Nothing had happened. It's almost another 2 weeks. We're coming up on a month here, and nothing has happened. Is that, Brent, I'm going to go back to you as the politics guy. Is there any push to get something done in the disparity study?
No, to be honest, after that came out, that was kind of the last I heard about it. And which was kind of surprising because it was a big deal. And, you saw a lot of people wrote about it. That it tends to be kind of how things happen in Trenton. There's a big hubbub and then it goes away. But this is a big deal. And I would imagine this is not the last we've heard of it. But no, it has not been a major issue in the water in Trenton, as far as I'm know.
Anybody else want to jump in on disparity? And for those who don't know, it just says, I mean, look, one of the numbers that we quoted was they took a particular construction type contract and they said Black-owned businesses should get 10% of what they get, and they got 0.14%. And it was the same for Hispanics and Asians. Women did a little bit better, but still stunningly, abysmally low. And that's something the state's worked about. And there's a lot of issues involved in that, but the silence has been surprising. Stacie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, as the one woman on this panel, I'll say that a lot of it's going to take a while to fix, right? Some of it you can't just fix. Like, it just happens that there's 10 more male journalists for every one female journalist in New Jersey, and it's sad but true. And no matter what you do, it's just going to be a fact that there's going to be a panel of 5 and only one woman. But I mean, with awarding of contracts too, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what can be done immediately. There can be changes in awarding of, grants and things like that, but I don't know how much you can announce besides the task force, the task force and the panels and stuff like that. So I don't know if there's a quick fix solution.
And I know there's a real concern out of the administration and others that if they try to say we're going to do X to X or Y to Y, it's going to be lawsuit, which is just going to slow everything down, and then the progress, which already is bad, goes nowhere. John, I can feel you wanting to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, eye-opening statistics in that study for sure, and especially in a state like New Jersey to see that. One thing I'll say is that maybe more damning, though, was some of the narratives, and Tom, I know you read through them, that were in that report from individual contractors who were seeking to do business with the state, and just how disheartened they were, accusations of political favoritism. But we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to these things, even though procurement law and contracting law can be really, really dense. And there are different categories depending on how large the contract is and the types of services you're trying to do. It gets really, really complicated. But if you read through those narratives, they would point some of these business owners to things that places like Philadelphia or New York are already doing to do a better job of sort of spreading the wealth, so to speak, when it comes to contracting opportunities. And so maybe it's not something where we have to, go to do it all ourselves. Like, check on what New York does, what Philadelphia does, see what's happening in other places where maybe they're a little bit more successful in terms of having a more fair contracting process. I will say, I know Treasury in-house is trying to do a better job and has like a new database to keep track of some of this so we can be more aware of the problems going forward. And Troy Singleton out of the Senate has tried to get some bills through in recent sessions in this area as well, and maybe even got something to the finish line in the last session. And we see bills already introduced. I don't know that they go to the full problem, but there have been some attempts to whittle away at this, but probably not as ambitious as the problem demands. Again, reading through some of those individual comments that the business owners, I mean, it's just tough to read and not feel for them, kind of like punching against the wall almost from their perspective, for sure.
And from their perspective, to see absolutely nothing being done in the week since, it's making them say, yeah, we've been telling you, we've been saying it, and all this. All right, look, we are harsh on the state. We've done all that because, I don't know, it's just where we got. Let's do something positive here. A big move for the state in December. Bell Labs announced that it was moving from Murray Hill, Berkeley Heights to the Helix in New Brunswick. A shout out to the Helix project and everything is doing there. Shout out to the Nest project. Murphy had wanted to become an innovative economy and a state of great, new age products. So I'm going to throw a couple out there. I'm going to start with the latest and the greatest, the shiny thing is the AI hub in Princeton that they announced. Matt, talk about that. Does the state really have a chance to corner the market on AI from others? Where can we go with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the very least, it's good to at least be at the ground floor of this. I mean, clearly AI is everywhere. It's at a very rapid rate. It's it's going to hit into ways of our life that I don't even think we can fully comprehend or be aware of yet. So even beyond the potential economic impacts, just to like be a thought leader on the process, I think is important, because again, there's just for as many upsides as there are to it, there are a lot of potential risks. So I think being on the ground floor of it is vital, just, you know, for a societal thing. And then again, yeah, I mean, the potential jobs that can come out of that, you know, it'll be interesting to hear more about what exactly this is going to entail. There's been some details, and I know NJEDA is involved. You know, we'll be spearheading it, but I mean, to have Princeton on board, I mean, just gives instant credibility to the whole project.
Stacie, where do you see this go as a business development tool, not just as a societal development tool? Is there a big business plate for the state to be all in on AI?
Your guess is as good as mine. AI, I mean, I think it's definitely potential, right? I mean, we are at the ground of what is happening with AI. AI was huge business story in 2023, and it'll be a big story in 2024. I think New Jersey has a lot going for it, and they're doing the right thing by, you know, trying to take advantage of the early research and development of AI.
All right, you've given me the perfect segue on big news story of 23 involving cool things. I'm going to go to OSW, or offshore wind. There was a little announcement right around Halloween that people noticed. Offshore wind was supposed to be the next big thing. EVs were supposed to be the next big thing. The wind port and all of that, which is still going, right? And there's still people active, and Atlantic Shores is fighting the good fight, and other people are getting involved, and we're having a lot of announcements. Is offshore wind and EVs, is that the future that we thought it was going to be? Are we trudging the way it should go, or is that something we're saying, okay, let's go over to AI now? Brent or John, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah. It certainly was a big blow, not just to the Murphy administration, but to the state's environmental plans. You know, it hasn't died. You see Murphy's continued along with this. They've put in more solicitations. You probably will see more offshore wind built, just because that's the way the world is going. There will continue to be pushback, but this won't happen. Probably the main things won't happen during his tenure. So where he was probably going to get a lot more credit for this if Ocean One happened during his time, he won't as much now. But yeah, I mean, I still think that this is definitely, you're not just going to see windmills disappear. I remember my wife and I drove up to Toronto a few months ago, and just seeing all the windmills all throughout the New York, upstate New York region. We were shocked at how many there were. So it's inevitable that they're going to start multiplying. You know, so I don't see this going away.
John, what do you think?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think, you know, the broader economic, you know, wins are, that's a bad pun, are you know, interest rates are higher, and if you're trying to finance construction or a big endeavor right now, anyone even buying a house is seeing that you're paying more for borrowing costs, and so that's probably filtering its way through all of these different, you know, whether it's buying an EV, which is already expensive. I priced one out recently when I needed a new car, and on my journalist salary, I couldn't get there. So, you know,
You've got like a Fred Flintstone mobile on your journalistic salary. I know where you're at.
whether it's, you know, EVs, plug-in hybrids, all the way up to these big wind energy projects, it's tough to do that in the current environment. And so I think you're seeing with the price of capital so much right now, you're seeing challenges, you know, across whatever you're trying to do. At the same time, like to what Brent said, this is still the direction we're headed in. So New Jersey's, you know, blessed with you know, a nice coastal location. We get a lot of wind, so maybe more wind than we like in some instances. So I think it remains to be seen whether these are like hiccups or really big impediments. But you definitely have a governor who is pushing heavily in still, you know, this point in his tenure, when we've had other governors sort of lose interest and start looking at things nationally, you know, still very heavily focused in some of these like innovation, quote, innovation type areas, whether you're talking about AI or clean energy, you know, versus, you know, just sort of like resting on his laurels and gliding to the end here.
let's talk about EVs, because look, if the state wants to get involved in offshore wind and they want to build stuff and they want to subsidize, okay, I get it. It's $1 billion budget. We've all got our priorities. That's good. But with the EVs, it's almost like, look, you must sell EVs. You can't sell this. We have specific targets. And when that came out, the reaction from the auto dealers was like, look, nobody's buying these things. And I think the story came out that whether it was Avis or Budget or National saying, we've got all these EVs that we're just trying to give away because we can't use them, we can't rent them, we can't do it. It's being pushed upon people. And I don't think there's anybody here that's like pro coal, right? We're not sitting here saying we want to do that. Everybody wants a clean environment, but you're battling with the EVs on forcing people to do something. And other than, a couple of EV stations at my local Stop and Shop, you're not seeing EV outlets like you're seeing gas stations. And John, you make the point, I think everybody prices out an EV when they're looking at a car, and it still doesn't make sense. Is that going to be a political issue for the next governor? And B, let's talk about the fact the next governor could immediately just say, no more EVs.
Well,
Anybody want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, but quickly, I mean, it's a factor in the Transportation Trust Fund discussions that are happening, because right now, and maybe that's a policy decision, we have a bunch of people who are driving EVs who are not paying the gas tax, so they're effectively using roads and bridges for free in New Jersey, at least not those that aren't the toll roads. So it's going to come to a head even a little sooner in terms of this, how we adjust our policies to what, could be a new normal, or maybe not happening as dramatically as the governor wants it to. One thing I'll say is it's a long way to 2035. A lot can happen in terms of we could have a different governor who takes things in a totally different direction. I mean, I always like to point out that even when something is written in law, the budget can override it, and there are hundreds of sentences in every annual budget that say, notwithstanding, law XYZ, we're going to go in this direction. And so, just because something is written in law doesn't necessarily mean it's a forever policy in New Jersey. But yeah, I mean, the EV issue is front and center, I think, already with the Transportation Trust Fund challenge.
And we always, God bless, we know that John's the only person that actually reads every line of the budget, not even the the administration. So we'll check back with him later for where that is. You guys are setting me up beautifully on the segues. We're talking about transportation. We're talking about EVs. We're talking about climate change. Let's go to congestion pricing, which in theory is being done to help the climate. There's a lot of dispute whether that's true. There's lawsuits are being filed, which I don't think anybody thinks that those are going to go anywhere or go away anytime fast. Is this just a matter of they're getting money from us that we want? Is there a legitimate congestion climate beef around this? Anybody can jump in on congestion pricing in the lawsuit and where we think that's going.
Again, I think. Oh, sorry, Stacie, go ahead.
I'll just say congestion pricing is a theory that has proven to help with the environment and with congestion, and yet we're fighting it, right? And the issue is whether people are going to continue to drive. And when we're talking about EVs and wind power, we're talking about, are we going to take the steps necessary to get people to drive less and to use less gas? Right. And so the congestion pricing is one way to get people to drive less. Whether it seems like it's going through in New York City. I mean, they're talking about as soon as June. They're putting up the mechanisms to start it. So I don't know what New Jersey, besides doing these lawsuits, I don't know if that's going to, it might delay it, but I think it's inevitable.
Brent, what say you?
Again, I putting the arguments aside of what's true and what's good and bad, it's still a perception thing that I think a lot of politicians are thinking of. Those suburban swing voters who do drive into the city, whether or not it's good for the environment, they're going to go, oh my gosh, I'm going to pay this much more. So putting aside what's, actually happening and what could actually do, that's what I think the fear is. It's that whole affordability kitchen table thing. My parents, for example, suburbanites their entire life. I can't remember the last time they took the train to New York City. They've driven in every time they go to a Broadway show or to a Mets game. So I still think that's the fear, is like you have those suburban swing voters. You're going to hurt them. So I think that's why you're still seeing this be an issue for the governor and for people in New Jersey.
Of course, no chance that they're going to a Yankees game, which is duly noted.
That is true.
Look, I don't listen. If we need more money, they should just tax the businesses. All the businesses are making billions of dollars. Just go get it from them. I don't know why they have to go to these silly commuters. We talked about legacy. We talked about the next governor. So that's going to be our last topic here. The race is already going strong. There's more people that are going to jump in. Some have to wait for their November election to do it. Let's just do an early straw poll. Brent, I'm going to go back to you on the politics. Are you surprised that there are this many people involved? And it should lead to a lot of good debate and a lot of vetting of candidates, yes?
I'm not surprised there's this many people. In fact, there's probably going to be more, and definitely going to be more. I'm surprised there's this many this early, but maybe the people are trying to get a foothold in a race that's still a year and a half away, more than a year and a half away. So yeah, I mean, but this is going to be a heavy one on both sides of the aisle. You're going to see multiple candidates running. It's an open seat. The last time we saw an open seat was when Christie ran, and you saw there were multiple candidates on both sides too, more on the Democratic side, because but Republicans probably feel they have a very strong chance this time. The governor's office tends to go back and forth in New Jersey. So this is going to be a really interesting governor's race. There's going to be a lot to watch.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and it looks like there's going to be a lot of heavy hitters in this race. I mean, I would echo what Brent's saying. I mean, this to have an open seat like this, I mean, it's going to attract strong candidates. I think everybody who is in already or will be in, and there's definitely going to be more candidates throwing their hat in, all have a base of support, have something to stand on. So I think you're going to see a pretty robust primary process for this race for sure.
Stacie, I'm going to jump to you because I think we all hope that we're going to benefit on this. If Mikey and Gottheimer get in, which they're expected to do, they are both fundraising machines, and we can only hope that they'll spend some advertising on New Jersey publications in the area. But all jokes aside, this could be an incredibly expensive gubernatorial race. I mean, both of them are big-time fundraisers, and I think the money that goes into this race could be enormous, correct?
It could. I mean, I think between now and, in a year that they'll have it figured out. They're not both going to be spending. I think right now it's just everyone's throwing their hat in and trying to figure out who's got the most support. Last time around, it was Phil Murphy. And once he put his hat in the race and people know what a big fundraiser he was and how much money he had, everyone kind of dropped out. And so we're now at the point where everyone's kind of feeling each other out and seeing who's going to have the most support. So it could be an expensive race, but it also depends on who the Republican candidate is.
John, give me your take on the candidates and the potential issues that you see coming up in the next race.
Yeah, just jumping off something Brent said is, we've had two-term governors, but it's been a long time in New Jersey since we've had a two-term Democrat. So that sort of presents an interesting dynamic. In terms of issues, I think it'll be interesting to see sort of, what's going to happen at the national level. We have big election coming up this year nationally. That usually plays a big role in how things go in the New Jersey gubernatorial election. And we always have this weird situation where sometimes a candidate will be rooting for the other party to do a good job in Washington, so we have a strong economy, so people aren't rage voting so much when we come to the New Jersey election. So I think what happens nationally will sort of be overlooked as a big factor for our gubernatorial election. So far, we've seen, it's been pretty respectable in terms of the discussions and what people are saying. It's been policy oriented so far in terms of some of what we're hearing even from the early candidates. So we do have a lot of big challenges in New Jersey that are going to have to, that are going to go into the next governor's tenure. So, from my perspective, the pension fund is a huge issue that often gets overlooked. That between retiree health benefits and pension requirements, it's a huge part of the budget, and it's not fixed. I mean, the state's making full contributions on the pension side, but we have to make these big contributions for decades. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what kind of commitments the candidates have in that area. Transportation, which goes to the economy. So many issues. We could do a whole other forum on just the policies that are going to be inherited by the new governor. And, you know, then you say, why do you want the job?
Look, listen, this has been great. We're respectful of people's time. And since for whatever reason, they decided to put me in charge of this dog and pony show, I'm going to get the last word, and I'm going to talk about the business of journalism, if we're business. So bear with me for about 90 seconds. And I've made this comment a couple of times, and everybody has been, it's been eye-opening for people. So I'm going to jump out and say it. So first of all, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to reference 9/11. If that bothers you, I'm going to give you time to adjust. But so back in 9/11, you may not know, I worked at the Star-Ledger at the time. I was the high school sports editor and when 9/11 occurred. And that was a crazy day in journalism. And I always tell the story that, yeah, there were no high school sports that day, but if you were at the Ledger and the early of NJ.com, it was all hands on deck. It was an incredible effort by the NJ.com team, writers, reporters, photographers, videographers, everything. I believe for the first and only time in Star-Ledger history, I'll still say, put out an afternoon edition, which is a Herculean effort. It was as thick as a Sunday paper was at the time. And the Ledger literally sold those on street corners around the state through car windows. This is sort of kind of pre-internet. We had it, but not really in cable. And people, you know, the Ledger was still king then. And the point I make to people is it was $1. And we had people on street corners, and you gave them $1 and we gave them a paper, and everybody was so grateful that the Star-Ledger provided all of this information on this terrible day in New Jersey history. Why I bring that up is to talk about the news industry that all of us have chosen to join today. And I always love to be with my colleagues because we always say, if you guys were dumb enough to get in this business like I am, we're partners for life, right? I mean, it's tough hours, tough pay, but we love it and we do it. So I contrast that to, God forbid, there was another 9/11 that happened this morning. And God forbid an organization like NJ.com put the same resources for the same coverage of what they did on that day, which was Pulitzer deserving. If at the end of the day at 4 o'clock, NJ.com said, we have all this unbelievable coverage, but you have to pay us $1 for it, like you did on 9/11, there would be universal outrage. People would say, how dare you try to profit on such a horrible event? So there would be calls to cancel the Star-Ledger, to everybody lose their job. They're trying to take advantage of this. So when people talk about the journalism business and what we're facing, it's not whether how people want to consume news. It's not about ad revenue. To me, it's about there's a changing shift in perception that what we all do here should be free. We should just provide all of this information and everybody should take it for free. And God forbid anybody should have to pay for it. And I don't know how that changes. I don't know how people say, if you want to have quality news, as everyone on this panel produces, you get what you pay for. So I don't know the answer here, but I know that to me, that's been the biggest shift in the journalism world since I've joined it, is that everyone assumes that what we do should all be free. And if that happens, then eventually all you're going to have is a whole bunch of TikToks without any credibility. So listen, I'll speak for the other 4 here. We absolutely love what we do. We're glad to do it. We hope you guys support us in every way, shape, or form. There's a lot of outlets here that are not represented. We love all journalism. We encourage you to support us in any way, shape, or form. That's what we're doing, and that's somewhere that needs to change, because if not, 20 years from now, it's just going to be me talking, and nobody wants to hear that. So there you go. With that attempt at somewhat history and try to make a big picture with a little bit of comedy, I'm going to go to the king of comedy, Tom Bracken, bring him in here. Tom, you've been a big supporter of the media. We greatly appreciate it. I'll give you the final word.
King of comedy, right? All I would say, Tom, to comment on what you just said, ditto for the not-for-profit community. Not-for-profit, many are in the state, great organizations, do great work, and they are going through the same kind of financial difficulties that the journalist community is. But we are approaching what I would call journalist desert in New Jersey, and we can't afford to do that. We got to get our message out. And it's one of the biggest factors I see in getting the state back on track and having productive, constructive dialogue is the fact that we don't have enough media to do that. So I totally support the media community. We're very big proponents of that. So thank you for bringing that up. Well, we promised you an energetic discussion with quality dialogue, and I think we overpromised there. I think that what we got today from this group was absolutely phenomenal, touched on many different topics of importance to the state of New Jersey. I want to thank Stacie, Matt, John, Brent, and Tom for participating today. And I will tell you that every one of the topics that was talked about today will be expanded upon at our Renew Jersey Business Summit, March 26th and 27th in Atlantic City. If you enjoyed today's discussion, you have to go to our event. We're going to have a blockbuster lineup of panelists and keynote speakers. Any of you who went there last year and enjoyed it, this year is going to be much, much bigger, much more comprehensive, with a greater number of people, probably well over 1,000 people. So I encourage you all to be there to hear what we're going to talk about. We're about to make an announcement probably later this week or early next week about some additional keynote speakers other than the governor, who will be a keynote speaker that is kind of a blockbuster group of keynote speakers that I don't think we thought we could get, but we did. And when we list the panelists that we're going to have and the topics we're going to discuss, it's one of those events where if you don't go, you're going to sit back after it's over and say, why didn't I go there? So please look at on our website, the Renew Jersey Business Summit, March 26th and 27th. It's well worth your time to go there and participate. And I think it will be something that this event will be something that people will remember for a very long time. So again, let me thank the sponsors for today's event: AT&T, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, and KPMG. Thank you to the reporters. Thank you to Tom. Thank you to the participants in the audience. We will have more of these, obviously, because they're so popular and so informative. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Here.